This story is a living passion. I'm not crashing.
Put a little to emphasize that light section. See what that does. Okay. Then also, I'm going to see if this will work. I'm going to just take pure water and just see if I can lift out a little bit of a highlight on this door. Yeah. As if there's, the light is catching the top of a carved section. Have this area's there. And I might as well begin to deal with this ground here. What I think I'm going to try and do is get a little bit of dry brush in there. So I'm going to take this. I don't want it too wet. I'm just going to see if I can. I got a little bit in there, got some. Need, I think, a little more pigment on. And then, just because I always think this path, must have rubble and bits of gravel and stone or whatever, I'm going to just work with some of the shapes that I've just created, a little bit more to the blue side, and just play with some of these. Not quite that strong. Play with some of these shapes, particularly where it is more towards the center and less down here. Now I'm moving into my mid and mid darks again to define some of these, the dark parts of these stones, etc. See if I can't, with really light values here, back to light values, I just want to see if I can give the sense of a bit of detail. Really light values, so I'm adding lots of water. I'm just going to see if I can get the sense of stonework in there. And I definitely don't want to do the whole thing. I find if I just get a few shapes in there, your eye will take care of the rest, and it will read as if this is a wall made out of stone. And in here as well. And I just try and put them in pleasing groupings. I'm going to come in and soften some of that. Just water now and soften some of these. And when I soften them and drag them, they almost become more stone-like. And I now want to come in here and have a darker value. Still remembering I have to have this shadow, and I'm going to run the shadow over everything here. So I don't want this to be super dark, but I want this shape in here to be a little bit darker. I want this to be a little bit brighter, so I'll move over to the side here. Take some of my red and yellow, and because this edge of this ledge, the window, is catching a bit of the light, I want to do that there. Just going to take a select few of these brick type shapes and just outline them a little bit. And there's some of them are still wet and they're running, which is just fine. going to darken the shadow. So I put quite a strong value on there. Now I'm just taking water or a wet wash there so I can run this. Yeah. Okay, I've taken a good long look at it, and there's a few things that I need to do, and we're getting close to completion. The first one, I need a shadow across this door and across this entire background, but the trim on the window inside there is far too bright. Doesn't make sense with these things around it. So I'm going to take just a light wash, a little bit darker. And just go over it, just to push it back. And that might not even be enough. That's better. Do that in there. I just feel it, the cottage or the building needs to be more firmly connected with the foreground, which means I need to go in there with some stronger darks. I've actually, for the first time ever, it is actually 2 days since I did the first part of this, so my paint here is all just totally dried up, and I'm just reactivating it, so it's acting a little bit differently than it did before. Okay, so something like that. I think a little bit more blue, just darken it a touch. And I'm holding my brush parallel to the paper, thinking I might get a little bit of dry brush, which I've done. And then I want some, so I'll soften this, but I just want to get some of this stuff on there. And I'll immediately come in with just water. And soften some of those edges. Add a little bit of red to that. Again, I want to reduce some of this white, and I think I'm going to keep that area there as my one pure white. So a lot of it needs to be toned down. And I'm going to begin with really just tinted water that's towards the orange side. So some of my red, some of my yellow. And I'll have a little more red towards the outside area. And this is really thin, lots of water, really just tinted water. And I'm going to go over this. Oh, certainly over there. I want to go over this one. And then towards the middle, I'm going to add more of the yellow. I want to go over, not all of it, but bits of this, bits of that. And now that's really just, it's a glaze. In this case, it's a glaze, which is just a super thin wash, just to tone things a bit. And now I'm just coming slightly darker mixture. I'm just going to, into that glaze, add bits and pieces. And it sort of starts to look, not detail, but it suggests detail. And in here, have some. I'm going to go right over that thing there, that shadow. Now I'm ready to put the shadow on the door, and this shadow is going to go right over the background. I want it to be fairly dark. I want a strong contrast in the door. So I'll basically mix my triad together to kind of get a neutral kind of gray. Again, this paint is not acting as consistently as it did when it was first on the, when I first put it out fresh. Okay, I think somewhere in there is the mixture I want. It's more to the blue side. And this shadow is going to come right over the door. Like this. And I'm going to take it right over the background, the inside of the door. It's bleeding a little bit there, but that's going to be fine. I've dried it off and I've erased all the pencil lines just to clean it up. So I'm going to just do a couple of final things. I just want to lift out some shade, some value contrast in here, and it'll just make it maybe a little bit sun dappled or just a little bit more interesting. This paint is lifting very nicely. Yeah, so that's good. The other thing, a lot of this brickwork, if I just kind of underline it, there'll be a bit of a shadow underneath and on the right hand side. So if I start just picking out some of these shapes that I've identified and just begin that process. I do want to darken this window up here and give it a little more purpose. Like that. Just took a bit more ultramarine blue. What a difference it is working with freshly squeezed out paint and that when it dries. Okay, so I'm just thinking underneath this window here, I want a more dramatic shadow. Also underneath this ledge here, I want something that's more dramatic. And some of these, I think I'll just shift my color a little bit. Some of these pots, cadmium or red light, all the cadmiums in fact are opaque watercolors, which means they have a lot more body to them. So if I take this super rich, very little water, almost pure pigment on my brush, I can go over these flowers, and this will be a very, will really brighten up those flowers, make them really stand out. Now if I tone it down a bit for the flowers over towards the side here, and in fact I can hopefully do the same with the green and the yellow to get a little bit of, yeah, you see, normally watercolor you can't do light over dark, but with the opaque paints you can do a little bit of that. So you can brighten up, like that'll brighten that one up, and this one in the window will brighten it up a little bit. Yeah. Green, add it to the red so I get a real dark version of the green. Just keep it, just make sure it stays a bit green, and in here have a bit of, I always find it harder when I'm just making up these strokes than if I actually was looking at had a real plant in front of me, but something like that. I want to take something that's going to kind of be a brownish thing. I'm going to have this branch thing come like that, and then have it come through a little bit. I'm going to call this, I'm very pleased with this, a very popular subject matter. I'm going to leave it now, but just be forewarned, in real life I just love this image, and so I will keep working and playing with it, but it's just final little details. You've got the idea, and I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.